World Development System. Chapter 31. Marchioness Ain was middle-aged woman with beautiful features. It seemed that she maintained her beauty regularly with herbs, potions, and other items. She was brunette with brown eyes with a height of 5 feet and 9 inches. She also had a son named Julius who was 18 recently, but he was in the imperial capital's Knight Academy completing his initial training. Greetings to the Marchioness. As you guessed, this time we came to meet Father and Marquis since we wanted to complete a deal regards to the soaps we provided this time around, but it was fortunate to meet you today. Joseph greeted Ain and later mentioned his intentions. I heard from Steve that you were the one who supplied the rose soaps in the city this time around. Well, good luck with your venture. Meanwhile, who are those friends of yours over there? Marchioness said to Joseph. Let me introduce you, this is John, Eva, Jay, Josephine, and Sally. As for Philip, you already know him. It is John who made those new soaps which are being circulated in the upper noble circles nowadays. Joseph introduced his friends and waved to Philip so that he can present the gifts which were prepared to Ain. While John and others greeted Ain. Marquis Ray was a tall man with blonde hair and a sharp face. He had strict as well as a jolly air around him. He looked like a man who had been through a war but understood the importance of life. During his younger years he had followed the kingdom's army in war and had made great achievements for himself and his domain, and hence he had this air around him. Today he wore luxuriously with a black cape, black shoes, and white gloves. He wore a full-sleeved leather shirt with a sleeves furry coat on it with a white shirt inside which could only be seen on neck and borders of leather shirt with a black pant. The borders of his hands were cuffed like most nobles' clothes. And it seemed that recently the nobles had started using buttons and new designs from the snake's family, and it had become quite popular because of its comfortability. Marquis Ray very much understood the importance of trade and commerce, and hence he promoted commerce and merchants in all of his domains, but there were certain norms like slavery which he couldn't fight as it would require a lot of money, strength, and political will to achieve his aims, so he never declared his intentions to anyone and acted like most of the noblemen. But certain businesses like the food and pearl industry were under his family's control as they were very strategic to them. Most of the nobles also controlled the food circulated into their domain. As they were conversing, Marquis and Frank came in the room with the butler leading them inside. While laughing, Marquis came inside the room and said to everyone in the guest house, well, everyone is having a happy conversation this time around. You might be John, which was being talked about earlier when I talked to Joseph last time, and you guys might be the friends of John and Joseph. Ain, please show them the house while we discuss our business dealings for now. Well, we can converse later on. Ain led Eva and others and let them discuss their business matters as she understood from her years of experience. Ain turned to Eva and others and offered to lead them in the mansion. Why don't you guys join me and tour the mansion while they deal with matters of their own? Okay, that won't be a problem. Eva replied without thinking much and let John and Joseph finish their dealings first. Only Philip and Marquis Ray's butler remained while others left the room. It seems you have been quite jolly these days, Joseph, Frank asked Joseph after he was done watching from the sidelines. Well, I got information about who was targeting us just yesterday, so I guess it was a good occasion to feel happy. Joseph smiled and deliberately revealed this information to Marquis and his father so that they can understand that they can't use intel as a potential bargain chip this time. Both the Marquis and Frank were shocked but thought they were bluffing, and hence they decided to probe them a bit. So who might be targeting you guys and the soaps you produce? Frank asked in a probing tone. Well, let's first sit and have drinks first. Marquis signaled his butler and decided to have the conversation in a relaxed environment unlike the tense one. Philip then handed over some of the documents to Frank and Marquis which were already prepared by him. This was some of the information which we collected after coming to Pearl City. So what do you think, Dad? Joseph knew that his father would mostly ask him this question and hence he was already prepared. Both the Marquis and Frank looked at the documents one by one and they were very shocked because a lot of information matched while there was some information which even they didn't know about. Like how one of Joseph's brother was plotting with a duke from the west. Plus, from the authenticity of the information, they knew that Joseph's eldest brother Max was recently in the Black Wolf Duchy at the western part of Elias' kingdom. Max and some of his cousins had allied with Black Wolf Duke because Duke too was in the business of soaps and hence their interests matched, so it seemed Max had quite an ambition by hiding his purpose all this time while allying with the Duke at the same time. I think the information they have this time is very credible since most of the facts match with our information while some of them need to be verified. What do you think, Frank? Marquis asked Frank in a serious tone after looking through the papers. Well, 3/5 of the information has matched with us and it wasn't that bothersome since there was bound to be a leak from your brothers sooner or later. However, Duke Black Wolf supporting Max and your cousins from behind the scenes would be quite troublesome. However, it won't be a problem for now as Duke could only help them in the form of funds and his own connections since his domain is quite far in the west while we are in the south. Additionally, with our support you guys don't have to worry much if our deal is finalized. Frank thought and gave his opinion to everyone present in the room. Joseph, tell me one thing, how did you get this much information about the people eyeing you guys? Or have you always hidden your spies and decided to show your cards today? Marquis was very curious and hence decided to ask them. Well, it was John who got this information from one of his partners this time around, so we thought we should at least make preparations beforehand and reveal it to you guys. Joseph thought and decided to throw it all on John's head as he didn't want to reveal John's deal with Vlad and Diana. It was anyways expected that Duke Black Wolf would make a move on us sooner or later since our interests conflicted, but it is a good thing that we got early information on Max and your cousins so can take preventive measures this time around, Marquis told Joseph and John while he didn't probe further on John's source of information. Marquis didn't hold back if it was Frank's son or not because after using the soaps this time both of them had decided to support them and it would be a good opportunity for them to claim another market and source of income while it was inevitable that there would be treachery and betrayal in a big family where everyone hoped to acquire more power. Frank was of the same opinion as he had already experienced the same thing with his brothers when he was young and decided not to interfere in the rivalry and treachery between the siblings and cousins. Both the Marquis and Frank looked at John very curiously this time around as they didn't expect John to have a partner who had such a detailed network when it came to information gathering and decided not to probe further as everyone had their secrets and got back to business. Chapter 32. Both the Marquis and Frank looked at John very curiously this time around as they didn't expect John to have a partner who had such a detailed network when it came to information gathering and decided not to probe further as everyone had their secrets and got back to business. Frank then said the terms after Marquis signaled to him, I will get straight to the point, so here is the deal. You guys will solely provide soaps in bulk to us in the southern domain of the Elias kingdom. At the same time we will meet up with market demands and use our connections to advertise in upper circles of nobles and merchants in return of a contract for southern domain. Last time you guys talked about your problem with Baron Mendez, right? We have already negotiated with them and they will sell you the town if meet a suitable price. From our predictions, he will most likely settle at 15,000 to 20,000 gold coins. As we had thought earlier, he wanted to milk as much as he can from the injuries of his son Antonio and this was the price he agreed. But there is a catch that if you guys fail to protect your domain then Baron may try to invade your domain and soap factory in the name of reclaiming land from beasts because of your incompetence. However, this time it will be quite hard for you if you want to protect North Frontier Town, so our advice still remains that you should leave the town. Meanwhile, the royalty of Elias Kingdom have the same rights to reclaim a territory lost by any noble to foreign invaders. So it was decided that they would first buy it from Joseph first, he would later sell soaps in his capacity in other domains, while if more were needed then Marquis and Morgan family can directly buy it from John at the same price which Joseph sells to them, but most probably it would be Joseph providing them the soaps. Okay, that sounds good, but I would like it if I can buy more slaves, whether it is for labor or warriors, since I would need them in large quantities later on. John thought for a while and expressed his thoughts to Marquis. Marquis Ray took out a token from his pocket and gave it to John while instructing him on how to use it. Okay, that won't be a problem. Take this token and show it to slave dealers so other nobles and people in authority won't question you if you anything where it is warrior slaves or labor in large quantities. Meanwhile, I think you guys weren't able to buy any better warriors this time around, am I right? Marquis had already expected this problem to occur as most of them were already bought by rich merchants or nobles, while they had already expected John to buy more slaves for labor and protection, as there was low population in North Frontier Town and John was going to North Frontier Town, so Marquis and Frank were already prepared to clinch the deal. Both Joseph and John smiled, as they had already expected this type of thing to occur before they arrived, and hence this was also one of the reasons they had decided to collaborate with Marquis. The most unexpected deal this time at Pearl City was actually their meeting with Diana and Vlad. That's true, it would be quite helpful if Marquis and Mr. Frank can solve our problem this time around, John replied without hiding his intentions. We were already prepared this time around, so you don't have to worry. We have prepared 50 warriors, slaves and 5 instructors from my knight order to accompany you and help you at North Frontier Town if you want. But I can't guarantee you that they will be useful in deterring the beasts outside. However, we can help you in other ways, Marquis said to John. This was how both the parties sealed the deal, and now was the time that they decided to relax and tour the mansion. With the passing of time, it was time for lunch. Everyone then went to the dining room. During this time, Ain and Eva were looking at the artifacts and paintings which the Marchioness had recently acquired. During this time, Marchioness also got to know and was very shocked to hear that Eva was Melanie's great-granddaughter, while John was her student who was proficient at the mid-level pharmacy, and about how he had defeated Antonio in a duel at East Sea Town. Later, everyone gathered at lunch. During the lunch there was a lot of new cuisines which were prepared for everyone. From the looks, it seemed that Philip and other servants of Joseph's mansion helped the chefs and other servants of the mansion. Both the Ray couple and Frank were very surprised after eating the new dishes provided by the servants. After inquiring from the butler, they got to hear that it was Joseph's chefs and servants who helped the chefs of mansion today and gave new recipes and cuisine to increase the variety of food. Ice cream was especially liked very well by Marquis and Marchioness. Joseph, which one of your servants made such a delicious dish in your mansion? While eating, Marchioness asked Joseph in a blissful tone. Well, it was John who introduced this dish after we had a banquet at his house. So it was later found out that John was the one who created this dish and taught it to the servants in his mansion, so I too made my servants take the recipe without hesitation after the banquet. I had the same reaction which you guys are having right now, Joseph laughed and replied to Marchioness, pointing towards John. This dish was quite a surprise. I am sure if it makes its way towards the imperial capital it will create quite a sensation that it made at the mansion today. What do you think, Steve? Marchioness asked Marquis and gave her opinion. Chapter 33. This dish was quite a surprise. I am sure if it makes its way towards the imperial capital it will create quite a sensation that it made at the mansion today. What do you think, Steve? Marchioness asked Marquis and gave her opinion. That's true. It is quite a novel cuisine. I think this dish would make a very good impression in front of His Majesty Lionheart and other cotters at the palace. Maybe we can introduce it at the yearly ceremony this year in Imperial Capital. What do you think, Ain? Marquis thought a bit and gave his opinion after being asked by Marchioness. Well, that's okay with me. John, do you have an opinion since it was your creation? Ain thought about it and asked John since it was John who created this dish. Okay. That won't be a problem. It didn't take John much thought as he agreed to Ain's proposal immediately. John, previously I heard from Eva that you had a duel with son of Baron Mendez, Antonio Mendez, and you defeated him? Where and from whom did you train previously? Because as far as I know, Antonio is quite a capable and high-grade knight who is able to fight wild and magic beasts on his own footing. Mrs. Ain asked John in a very curious and interested tone. Most of the time I actually trained by myself. But whenever I trained I always simulate my enemies so that it improves my efficiency and practicality. John answered her in a roundabout way, not agreeing while not disagreeing as well. Joseph, you can transport all the slaves with your fleet this time and in the future as well. If you have any problems, state it earlier, okay? Marquis Ray said to Joseph. Joseph expected the transportation job to be given to him, so he immediately accepted the transportation job. There won't be any problems, we were prepared for quite a long time already, so it was expected that we would transport the slaves. However, I would like it if we can get more ships and men on our fleet, then it would help us improve the protection our trade route. That won't be a problem. I have already informed my night order and our slave dealers. You can go to the dock and get one big ship, 3 other normal ships for your operations. Frank, give him the documents. Marquis replied to Joseph and signaled Frank to give him the prepared documents so that all the formalities can be done. This way, the deal was stuck between all the parties, and John's party took the leave after dealing with all the matters with Frank and Marquis Ray. After leaving the house of Marquis, they first decided to rest and then later they decided to visit the slave trader at the center of the city. Meanwhile, Philip took John and everyone present to the mansion while others were gossiping on their experience today at Marquis's mansion. Especially Josephine was very fascinated with the weapons and arts seen in the mansion today. At the same time, one of Vlad's men from the mansion informed about the dealings which took place to Vlad. He also got to know that John had previously beaten Antonio earlier. Previously this info would have been insignificant, but after their previous contact, they increased their information collection on John so that it suits their needs and future ventures, so that they understand what to avoid and favor in certain circumstances, whether in business matters or political matters. In the castle at the outskirts of Pearl City. It is as I thought, he is an all-round fighter and previously he defeated Antonio Mendez in a duel at East Sea City. Because of this incident, John came to Pearl Town so he can take help from Morgan family and Marquis Ray so that he can buy the North Frontier town which Baron Mendez was previously going to abandon. Additionally, it can be seen that John is very attached to the town, after watching how he is willing to spend his own resources and money to defend the people and town. He looks like a reliable partner. From the details, it looks like the duel took place because Antonio was interested in Miss Eva of John's team and he wanted to teach him a lesson so that he could woo her. However, his main motive is Grand Podi Winner Melanie, who is Miss Eva's great-grandmother. However, the thing is, not many people know Miss Eva's real identity, as her grandma usually hides it very thoroughly. Vlad summarized the report he got from one of his men to Diana, while she was looking at the paintings she got recently from noblemen of Elias. Interesting, so he is already at par with high-grade knights and swords. Hey, and speaking of which, he is also teamed up with Eva. Tell me everything you missed out. Diana spoke while looking at one of the paintings and thinking about the information she got from Vlad. Speaking of Miss Eva, John is also the only disciple of Miss Melanie, and that is how he got acquainted with Eva, and it also seems that Miss Eva has some feelings towards him which even she might be unaware of. From the rumors of North Frontier Town, John is a very capable person who has a very fast grasp towards knowledge and practical techniques he comes in contact with. Speaking of good news, John indeed is very capable of making a variety of cuisines, but he doesn't like to make it on his own, so we can look forward to our meeting next time at North Frontier Town. But you need not worry, as we have acquired some of the recipes he provided at the mansion. However, the most peculiar thing about John is, we couldn't locate any of his origins even after sending his pictures and information to all our intelligence personnel via one of our transfer magic. It seemed like he came out of nowhere and was not born on this continent, but from his looks and accent, he looks like a local. He might be an orphan who was neglected and hence not noticed as well, however this can't be confirmed. Vlad finished his whole report. There are a lot of unknowns around him. Well, it doesn't matter. From how he is willing to protect that town, he doesn't seem to be an ungrateful person. How do you think we should help him protect North Frontier Town? Diana replied and asked a question to Vlad. That's true as well, however, we shouldn't actually expose the cover of our men so easily. How about this, we let them protect that town on their own first, and if the need arises we can help them from shadows. Plus, from what I know, Antonio is planning to take his revenge when they will be engaged with resisting magic beasts for the humiliation he got from John earlier, and asked for some assassins from Prince Hector, but he hasn't gotten his reply yet. Vlad replied to Diana. Okay, we will do it this way, plus keep an eye on the assassins Prince Hector sends to kill John, because I am sure that noble named Bard will inform Prince Hector about the previous incident. Diana gave her order and ringed a bell so that her maid Maurice could bring in another guest who was waiting in the mansion. Meanwhile at John's end. After reaching the mansion, they rested for a while. Later everyone headed towards the slave market so that they could have a better look and make use of the token for buying better slaves for production purposes. And they also wanted to take a look at all the slaves they brought recently and tell them his conditions, so don't resist when they are transported via sea to North Frontier Town on their next journey. John had already told to Joseph that all the slaves must be treated with respect so that he can have loyal men later on which he could rely on. John was most interested in that family of 5 and the dwarf named Tornwall. It was because both of parties seemed to have a story. That was why John was more interested in them and hoped to make them his loyal men later on. One of the reasons was that he knew that he can't handle every single thing on his own and he would need loyal men who would support him later on. Chapter 34. Meanwhile at John's end. After reaching the mansion, they rested for a while. Later everyone headed towards the slave market so that they could have a better look and make use of the token for buying better slaves for production purposes. And they also wanted to take a look at all the slaves they brought recently and tell them his conditions, so don't resist when they are transported via sea to North Frontier Town on their next journey. John had already told to Joseph that all the slaves must be treated with respect so that he can have loyal men later on which he could rely on. John was most interested in that family of 5 and the dwarf named Tornwall. It was because both of parties seemed to have a story. That was why John was more interested in them and hoped to make them his loyal men later on. One of the reasons was that he knew that he can't handle every single thing on his own and he would need loyal men who would support him later on. As soon as they arrived at the slave market, John and everyone else first decided to head towards Tom the slave dealer. Today, Eva and others decided that they would go and see the slaves since they would be brought to North Frontier Town eventually, so it was always better to check them first. Meanwhile, Tom had already started treating the slaves as he was instructed by Joseph and John. So for the last 2 days, all of the slaves were given proper clothing and food while John and others handled other business. All of the slaves had astonished expressions on their faces since most of the time this treatment was only given to warriors, magicians, rune masters and top craftsmen. Tom didn't bother since he already got his payment, while he only ordered the guards to stop the commotion which the magicians and elite warriors were making. "Hey, why are those other slaves getting the same treatment as us?" The head of the magicians from the group asked the guards. "Yes, why are they being well fed and clothed like all the warriors and magicians?" Another elite warrior joined in and asked the question. After hearing this question, the guards weren't shocked and acted normally as they were thinking the same as warriors and magicians since this didn't fit the norm. At this time, the head of guards came in the cafeteria. Watching him come, everyone on the scene became silent, while guards restrained those making a ruckus at the cafeteria. After watching everyone become silent, one of his guards came and explained to him about the ruckus which was created by the warriors and magicians. Hearing this, he first sighed and later headed towards the platform to explain everyone about the current situation. He stood on the platform and said in a very firm and authoritative tone to everyone present in the cafeteria. "You guys might be thinking, why are those slaves getting better treatment? Well, the answer to it is, these slaves were bought by a merchant 2 days ago and it was under his orders that these slaves are getting better treatment. He hoped his slaves get better treatment and he has already paid for these services, so if any of you have problems regarding our discriminatory treatment then come and pay for the services and you can get the same treatment." After this, anyone creating problems with the guards will be dealt with appropriately. It won't matter if you are a magician, warrior, or a normal slave. He thought that this problem would not have happened and hoped that these bought slaves leave already, but this time it was a big buyer who would come continuously and hence Tom already ordered him to manage this ruckus. Hearing this, all of the slaves and guards were shocked since this was the first instance where they saw a large number of slaves being treated equally, because most of the time only knights or nobles captured in wars were given this treatment. Meanwhile, the slaves who were getting better treatment were also wondering about this situation and only now did they understand that it was their new owner who had made this request. In the corner of the cafeteria, Tornwall also had his own thoughts while he was eating and listening to the commotion like everyone else. While that merchant family of 5 was observing the situation from the sidelines. The head of the family was named Taylor and her wife's name was Martha. The 16-year-old boy's name was Jake. While he had his own opinions after watching what was unfolding, so he decided to share his opinions with his family. During this whole time, he cursed his own weakness and naivety for the earlier event. His parents didn't blame him, but he still felt that it was because of him that all of them got implicated. From this, he understood how ruthless the aristocrats were in regards to most of the things. Taylor was a man with short black hair while his height reached 5 feet and 11 inches. He looked like normal men, but he wasn't bulky like other men from villages, but more like people from the city who didn't do labor. He had black eyes and normal features of a white male, unlike the slight tan which laborers possessed. Martha, on the other hand, was very pale these days after they became debt slaves. She had brown long hair, blue eyes, and she had a height of 5 feet and 7 inches, but was still full of energy after John had ordered Tom to keep all of his slaves well fed. Jake had a height of 5 feet and 8 inches already. He also possessed brown hair and blue eyes like his mother. He had a white complexion and a sharp face, however he had a very serious look on his face. During this whole ordeal, it seemed he had matured a lot and there wasn't a single tinge of naivety on his face. However, his eyes expressed a lot of emotions which included anger, sadness, revenge, determination, and regret. During this time he also trained and had bulked up a bit after asking other slaves around. After looking at this boy, Tornwall most likely understood what had happened to them and treated this boy in a good manner as he pitted him and taught him some self-defense techniques he learned over here. Chapter 35. Jake told his father and asked his opinion. Dad, I think this time we are quite lucky to be noticed by that merchant. How do you feel? From his tone, it could be seen that he had matured quite a lot and that last event had changed him completely on how he viewed the world. Taylor sighed after watching his son and thought how he changed. Later he shared his thoughts with everyone. We can't be sure for now, who knows what he is planning, but regardless of that, we won't have a choice, so your hypothesis is mostly right and we are lucky this time around to be bought by that merchant. What do you think, Martha? Martha meanwhile thought that it was little too late for them after the previous incident, and so she said to them in a serious tone after listening to the father-son duo, to be very honest, we will have to wait and watch so we can decide later on. But the situation is good for now as he bought all of us and we won't be separated, so from this I can assume that he sees something of value in us and that's why he bought all of us, so there isn't any ill will later on. Taylor and Martha had the same opinion on slaves like normal people before when they were merchants. It was only now that they sympathized with them after watching themselves in a hopeless situation where they can't do anything to become free men. While Jake and his 2 brothers Stephen, 13, and David, 10, always thought that it was wrong when it came slave trade. Most of the countries had their own interests in the slave trade and hence they always tried to rationalize the slave trade and made propaganda in these forms: war slaves who were captured in wars, debt slaves who couldn't pay up their debts and hence became slaves, or the criminal slaves, who could be freed if enough money was paid and could be manipulated either way. However, behind the scenes, there was always the ugly truth of profits triumphing conscience, while there were mercenaries and nobles who were always ready to increase their profits and forcibly slaved people during wars. Meanwhile, Tornwall was in a trance and thought of his past while all of this was going on. He saw his very friend giving him some documents about a certain noble, and that was the last day he saw him. Tornwall, you see, I am being chased by some strong people and I don't have much time to converse with you, but promise me that you will keep these documents in a safe place and not let anybody get their hands on them. You must only pass these documents to. As his friend was in a hurry, Tornwall didn't even get to ask questions from him about what was going on that made him so much worried. As soon as he got the documents from his friend, he immediately buried them near the biggest tree of the forest when he grew up. On the next day, he saw that there were wanted posters of his friend which was issued by a certain prince. To fool everyone, his friend met a lot of people and hence Tornwall escaped death, but due to their close relationship, there were suspicions and hence he too got implicated and was sold as a slave. This was done very attentively and hence most people thought he got kidnapped by mercenaries. As killing on such a large scale would have created a very big scandal, all the people who got kidnapped were sold as slaves to make it more authentic that they were indeed kidnapped by mercenaries and sold in slave markets across the world. While their prints could still be seen behind these mercenaries. Cornwall didn't blame his friend as he knew he wouldn't do things if there wasn't a need. He didn't know what became the fate of his friend but he knew something big was brewing. After a while, he came back from his trance after listening to the head of the guards and he thought that his new owner was very interesting as he treated all of his slaves equally. As a dwarf, he was an elite blacksmith even among dwarves but those mercenaries who sold them never inquired about them. While they selling them in a hurry and hence he was taken as a normal man, Cornwall also never intended to show his capabilities and had given up his fate because their enemies had planned too thoroughly so that nothing could be spilled. After the commotion settled down, John and his party arrived at the main hall. They were already waiting and Tom was entertaining them while Tom ordered Jacob the head of guards to calm down the commotion which was taking place at the cafeteria. Today John came with the token Marquis gave him but after looking at the commotion, he understood that the ruling class controlled the slaves via dividing them based on hierarchy. This time John signaled to his friends and he first decided to meet all the slaves. So they understood John's meaning and remained in the guest hall while John walked with one of Tom's men to the hall where all of his bought slaves were kept. While Tom kept company with his friends. Jacob was in the room waiting for John with all the slaves. He had already seen him last time when he came, it was only when John was leaving that he remembered him after Tom's reminder. Tom usually only reminded Jacob when it came to important customers. After John came, Jacob greeted him first and said to him, "Mr. John, as you had instructed previously we had taken diligent care of the slaves you bought while you were absent. I hope you liked our services. What are your opinions?" John was satisfied with the outcome he had intended for his slaves. He replied to Jacob, "Discipline of your men is quite good when it comes to controlling people and executing orders. I was very satisfied this time around after listening and watching your performance firsthand." Hearing this, Jacob was very satisfied so he nodded and proceeded to the temporary platform made so that matters could be dealt with as fast as possible. Watching this, all the slaves became quiet and paid attention to him. "As you can see, this is Mr. John, he is your new owner and on his request, he wanted to meet you guys personally. Most of the time, buyers won't care about their slaves but you guys are lucky that Mr. John wanted to converse with you guys about matters which would take place in future." John signaled to Jacob and he left the room. He was first worried about his safety after looking at his physique but he still remembered Tom's reminder that he was a strong man himself so he shouldn't worry and hence he left the room immediately. Additionally, there were runes engraved on all the slaves so there was not much need to be worried about. Chapter 36. John signaled to Jacob and he left the room. He was first worried about his safety after looking at his physique but he still remembered Tom's reminder that he was a strong man himself so he shouldn't worry and hence he left the room immediately. Additionally, there were runes engraved on all the slaves so there was not much need to be worried about. Now you guys might be wondering why am I being so much generous to the slaves? So I will be honest with you guys. What I need is loyal slaves who have meaning and life in their eyes. I don't want slaves who don't have determination and will to live in their eyes. If you can promise me this then I can promise all of you guys that all of you guys can be free after 5 years of servitude under me without any conditions. I have seen that a lot of you guys have different feelings which can be seen from your eyes. Some want revenge, some have regrets over their actions. Some show determination which will mean you will try to leave your status as a slave by any means possible, some show self-mockery over their misfortune. Personally, I find the very idea of the slave trade very abhorring but circumstances lead me to go for slave trade since I lack manpower. I just wanted to let you guys know of my true intentions before you started any work for me. You might not believe me now, but I am sure you will believe me later on." Hearing this, many of the slaves were surprised. This included Jake and his family. However, Tornwall was still skeptical, but he still thought this was still a better situation, unlike the one where he would die as a slave. Jake was the first to ask him a question. Why do you think we should believe or trust you? How can you guarantee that you will free us from our slavery after 5 years? What if you kill us in the name of freeing us? Everyone here listening to him thought that Jake was right, since why would a slave owner be so generous to slaves? John gave it a thought and replied to him, everyone, one of you may have noticed that I didn't buy any criminal slaves, right? So you can see my sincerity from this action. As for the guarantee of you guys getting freed after 5 years, we can write that on a magic contract if you guys don't believe me. Perhaps you guys might be freed even before 5 years, but that will depend on your performance. As for my sincerity, I will pay you all the same as normal men, which you can spend however you want. Later John smiled and said to them, if you become one of my close confidants, then maybe I can even help you in your revenge or regrets later on. How is that as an offer for you guys? A lot of people here didn't know about the magic contract, but Tornwall and Jake knew about it. It was specially made for people dealing in slaves so that neither parties get scammed. Even John only got to know about it after he heard it from Tom when he was dealing with the slaves. We can make that contract here? Jake asked John. Usually, magic contracts were made when dealing with warriors and magicians or between two nobles who dealt in a large number of slaves. People not following the contract would anyway lose their rights over their slaves, and hence people gave money without any hesitance when it came to dealing with slaves. The only thing they needed to do was confirm the actual slaves and their numbers. Yes, we can, we will get it done right away. John then turned to other slaves who were confused and explained to them about the use of magic contracts, which would be helpful in the current situation. So if John didn't follow the contract, he would anyways lose his control over the slaves after 5 years. Jake also nodded in acceptance about the explanation, which more or less convinced them about magic contracts, and this also gave them more hope. All the slaves were quite astonished about this development and thought their new owner was quite interesting and sincere in his offer. Every slave was discussing after they saw all of this. It was only now that Tornwall spoke to John. Tell me, kid, what are you planning? Tornwall even thought John found out his identity, and hence he wanted to use his ability, and hence all this drama taking place right now. John smiled and asked Tornwall, well, what I want is loyal slaves, so I thought this would be the best and most effective measure to gain their trust. What do you think? Maybe, you have already known my identity as an elite blacksmith, but I still wouldn't make you weapons of our country, Tornwall told John with very firm and serious eyes. John was quite shocked but kept a calm face and said to him, well, I don't want you making weapons or machines of the dwarven country. What I want is, you make equipment according to my designs and not leak it to anyone. What do you say? Tornwall thought and replied, that won't be a problem, since it is only making machines you want and not to be leaked. Looking at you, I see that you are still a naive and honest child, but you are still cautious enough to buy slaves so that your secrets don't get leaked. Usually, I wouldn't have even tried to risk and expose my identity, but your behavior told me I should trust you. Maybe it is your sense of values which will attract people. Meanwhile, Tornwall sighed and thought of his past, that it has already been 3 years. Maybe I should trust this kid for once, and he has already made a magic contract, so it's better anyways, plus he doesn't seem like those cunning old guys, while from his eyes I can see that he doesn't discriminate people based on their race. Tornwall made his opinion on John after conversing with him. This was quite an unexpected turn of events for both John and Tornwall. Meanwhile, Jake and his family had their own thoughts about this situation. Taylor and others weren't bothered about their revenge and thought that they should make a new start under John, while Jake still had the idea of getting revenge from the noble. Taylor asked Martha while saying to everyone, with this magic contract I am pretty sure he doesn't have any ulterior motives, and it is still better than nothing, and it can give us a new start. What do you think, Martha? Chapter 37. Martha said to everyone seriously, that's true, if only our children can get freedom in the future, that was worth it, not to mention everyone. All of us have to work harder so that we can become free earlier and earn his trust. Any objections? No one objected while Jake was still in his own thoughts. After his speech was finished, John rang a bell and called Jacob and asked Tom to make a contract for everyone. Meanwhile, Eva and others came inside after he finished dealing with the slaves. Joseph was the first one to react after watching the contract Tom was making. "John, are you sure about making this contract? Won't you be losing if you make this contract? You can still get their loyalty by normal means, you know." John firmly said to him, "Think about it carefully, Joseph. With that, I would only get their loyalty as they are my slaves and not their trust. In the future I would need people who I can trust, and as you have seen, many slaves even die in the span of 5 years because of many physical and mental reasons. With this, I will be pretty much profiting from this deal. However, this deal needs to be under wraps from certain people." Joseph sighed and agreed, "Since you have made your firm stance and decision, I can't do anything but support you since you are my friend and our interests are intermixed now. Well, I will respect your decision on this choice of yours. As for Baron Mendez, he won't get a whiff about this contract to make any trouble among the noble circles. As for Tom, he is the main man of Marquis who deals in the slave trade in Pearl City, so you shouldn't be worried about him, and he might have already known about our deal with Marquis Ray. We only have to make sure to include this in the contract that the slaves can't reveal about this contract to others, so everything will be solved. Maybe he has past related to slavery and that's why he abhors slavery, or maybe a slave could have saved his life in crucial moments and so his disgust when it comes to slavery. Anyways, I should respect his decision." Under John's influence, even Joseph's thinking on slaves was changing day by day. Even Eva and others, after hearing this from Joseph, were shocked about this development but thought it was anyways John's way of dealing with his slaves. While Sally looked at him with very astonished and curious eyes, the thing was people very rarely treated slaves this good, and it was only after a long period of time that they were treated fairly and maybe given freedom. Meanwhile, it was also because of this magic contract and John's speech that Tornwall trusted John and decided to make his machines with utmost secrecy. Tornwall was the man who always upheld his words seriously, and that was also the reason why he had declined to make any of the machines and weapons of dwarven tech which he swore would never reveal in the past. Of all the slaves, it was only Jake which interested Eva and her team. They also thought maybe this guy could be one of the reasons why John is using so much of his resources. After this whole ordeal, all of them signed a contract with John, and all of the slaves were quite reassured about their future and understood that they should never reveal about this contract until they are free again. This time even Tornwall didn't make all the fuss like he used to make so that he won't be bought in the past. Watching this, most of the slaves and dwarves understood that this deal was most likely true, since even Tornwall accepted it and thought of following his lead. Sally approached John and gave him a piece of advice. "You know, if you were a big noble, then it would have created big political waves after this decision, because many noble interests are interlinked with the slave trade. You must be cautious and make yourself stronger, since this would be revealed sooner or later." Meanwhile, Joseph approached Tom and told him not to reveal this contract to anyone apart from Marquis and his father. When Tom was making this contract, he already understood that it needs to be hidden or else there would be problems and implications later on, and he was just wondering if he should talk to Joseph or not. As Tornwall had guessed, John was changing the perceptions of his friends towards slaves slowly but definitely, and it was his abilities and his sense of values which were attracting people. Meanwhile, at a certain castle nearby Pearl City, Bard was currently meeting with Prince Hector and waiting for him. Prince Hector's butler reported to the prince in a certain hall, "Prince, Bard has come and he wants to meet with you as he wants to pass on certain information about the events which took place in Pearl City. As you might know, Princess Diana was currently in Pearl City, so Bard had gone out to represent you at the auction unofficially. Meanwhile, Princess Diana was able to buy the longevity potion, but we encountered certain trouble when Bard was trying to buy Blucia family's Longthorn sword. It was actually a merchant who bought it at a very steep price. What do you think about this situation, Lord?" Prince Hector thought for a while and gave his answer to him. "Okay, bring him over and treat him well. We would anyway need more support from nobles if we want to achieve something in the next war, and the best way is to socialize and intermix our interests with these nobles." As for the merchant, we will see and act according to the situation. I don't want any political implications right now if that merchant has a big duke as his backer. It's a good thing that I wasn't present there, but if he had offended me then he would have certainly been made to apologize to me. Maybe that wouldn't have happened if I was present. Butler laughed and gave his answer, "As you wish, Prince. I think the same, as more nobles supporting us would be beneficial to us in future. Plus your eldest brother already has a lot of grasp in military matters, so we would anyways need more chips against him in future, so it would be better to make more connections and fewer confrontations in upper noble class for now." Butler then proceeded to invite Bart. Chapter 38. Butler laughed and gave his answer, "As you wish, Prince. I think the same, as more nobles supporting us would be beneficial to us in future. Plus your eldest brother already has a lot of grasp in military matters, so we would anyways need more chips against him in future, so it would be better to make more connections and fewer confrontations in upper noble class for now." Butler later proceeded to invite Bart, who was waiting in the mansion. "Okay, as master is free now, you can have a meeting now, so please follow me, Lord Bart." Bart didn't act all haughty in front of the butler because he knew that this butler was one of the right-hand men of Prince Hector, and hence he followed the butler without making any problems. After entering to the room where Prince Hector was staying, Bart first made his greetings and waited for the instructions of Prince Hector to proceed, while the butler was preparing the food and drinks for both of them. This time Bart had prepared all the information about John and his connections to Morgan family while waiting for Prince. After a pause, Prince Hector said, "Bart, you should already know why I am already pissed with the outcome, right? I don't want any of your excuses, just tell me who was the guy and who are his backers." Indicating that he would be more pissed if he didn't even investigate about them and came empty-handed. Bart told without holding back because, after years of dealing with upper-class nobles, he understood one thing: that you should be prepared if you make mistakes. After watching his father and brother, Prince, this time it was a new merchant named John, but this time he was with the grandson of Morgan family, and while we were bidding I had even added all of my money, but when I was bidding for the sword their attitude seemed like they wanted to buy that sword at any cost, and they had already raised by 4 times, so we didn't have enough money at that time. Bart emphasized on the word grandson as he knew that Carl had a lot of authority in Pearl City and he had connections to a lot of nobles with upper class since he was an honorary marquis, which he gained after using a lot of connections and fortune. But the most important thing was that when I was leaving the auction I saw that John and Joseph were having a meeting with Princess Diana and his personal butler. When I was looking at them from a distance and in dark, both butler and that guy John were able to sense me. So it seemed like both were quite capable fighters, as Bart didn't know about Vlad, so he said in a nonchalant manner. Prince Hector was thinking after taking in all the information which he got from Bart and asked him, "You didn't provoke or offend that butler, right?" Bart then replied cautiously as he sensed danger from that tone, "I don't think so." Prince didn't mind to Bart as he knew Vlad wouldn't bother about small fry, and asked his butler about his opinion. "Alistair, what do you think after listening to this information?" Alistair turned to Bart and confirmed the information. "You said his name is John and he was recently traveling with Joseph, right?" Bart confirmed it. "Yes, I am certain his name is John. He was with Joseph and he recently came with his friends to Pearl City on Joseph's trade fleet." "Master, a few days ago, it was also this guy named John who defeated Antonio in East Sea City due to a dispute over Miss Eva. At that time he was only acquainted with Jack, but Joseph was present during the duel as well, so I think this guy is the same John." Prince Hector thought a bit and said to Alistair, "So this guy also made problems with Antonio and now he bought the Icethorn sword at auction." Alistair understood and then asked Prince Hector, "Additionally, a few days ago, Antonio had requested for some elite assassins as he needed them to wash off his humiliation in East Sea City. But it has still not been approved yet." Prince stopped him and told, "But if from what Bart says is correct, then the problem comes if they have made a connection with Princess Diana and that scary butler." Alistair thought a lot and gave one his suggestions to Hector. "That's true, but that can easily be solved if we asked a third party to help Antonio where our hands would not be seen. But the main problem is that we don't want to antagonize Marquis Ray and Duke of Southern Forest for now. I suggest we use one of the brothers of Joseph to handle that situation, so even if we get discovered, Morgan family would restrain in accusing us since one of their kin was involved due to their rivalry in business, and it would be hard for them to accuse us since we are only helping the other brothers for acquiring power in the family. I suggest this because after looking at the history of Morgan family, there were always nobles supporting brothers from behind the scenes, whether it was previous generations or the ones before that. And if we want to be more careful, then we can use those assassins in the name of Antonio. We would only need to make connections between Antonio and one of Joseph's brothers, and as their interests would match, no one would be able to accuse us later on since we were only connecting merchants and nobles like we do all the time. Alastair finished giving one of his ideas. Most of the time it was Alastair who would help Prince Hector in strategizing his plans, whether it was political or economical. After hearing Alastair's conclusion and plan, Bart remarked in a cheerful tone, "Excellent. With such a great plan we would succeed no matter what. But Prince, I also wanted to add one more thing when you mentioned Miss Eva. From my information, John is also a disciple of Podiwunner Melanie." Chapter 39. Prince Hector also agreed and asked Alastair, "That's true, but Alastair, you didn't take that old hag Melanie into your plans. You might not know, but that crook Antonio is only interested in Eva because of two things, her beauty and her great-grandmother Melanie. Why do you think he would be interested in a nobody who doesn't add value apart from her looks?" Alastair thought for a bit and said to him that also can be taken care of because, as you might know, Grand Podiwunner Melanie hasn't been in the political circle for a long while now. The most she could do is hire an assassin and go after Antonio. And you might also know that people in the court are also very unhappy from the time she left, so we can use this chance to get close to other dukes. Prince Hector's furrowed his brows and he remarked in a serious tone, as he knows people in the court from a young age and he knew they would backstab each other at the chance of getting long-term benefits, and told to Alastair in a very serious manner, "You underestimate those old men from the court, Alastair." Bart was shocked after watching such a face from Prince Hector for the first time. This time Alastair smiled and said, "That's why we will make our involvement as less as possible since we are only connecting two people. As long as everyone in this room stays quiet there won't be problems, I think," Alastair said as he looked at Bart with a serious expression. Meanwhile, Bart understood as well and smiled. After watching Bart's reaction, Prince Hector thought seriously and gave his orders, "Okay, we will go with your plan, Alastair. You will arrange their meeting and handle all the things which will be required later on." Alastair meanwhile proceeded to serve the food to both of them. This John seems very interesting, as he is capable to make that ghost Vlad interested in him as well. "Tell me more about this guy, Bart." Bart had all the information he could get on John, so narrated carefully, "I think he is the guy who has created those new soaps since he has connections to both Snake family and Morgan family, and they are the only ones who are distributing those soaps. That may also be the reason an unknown merchant was able to afford that sword. And recently he was seen in the slave market, so I think he is most probably buying slaves to cut his costs on making soaps." Prince Hector was quite piqued, as he was also one of the people who had used those new soaps which were circulated in the noble circles. Prince Hector looked at Alastair indicating what he thought of it. Alastair gave his honest opinion to both of them. "I think these conclusions are quite right, and recently from our information Joseph is getting more attention from his father among all the siblings, as it was indicated by the behavior of his cousins and siblings." Meanwhile at the slave market where John and others were present. After meeting the slaves and having a good talk, Eva, Josephine, and others today decided to tour the whole of Pearl City and also look at things which interested them. While Tom was preparing all the things required for the transporting of all the slaves after John's and Joseph's approval, he also first personally visited Marquis today for reporting all the dealings which took place. Marquis Ray said to Tom and Frank, "So he made a contract like this. It was quite unexpected from someone who has lived on this continent. Even I changed my views only after watching one of my best friends getting killed as a slave in another country. Maybe this is also one of the reasons I despise those mercenaries." Frank sighed as thought about Marquis's first war when mentioned this previous event, while he said to Marquis, well, it is something you experienced personally, that's why you are still attached to it, and it seems it changed me to some extent as well. And it seems Joseph as well got a friend with the same thinking, maybe he experienced something similar, or he might have come from a world where there is no slavery," Frank said jokingly at the end, to refresh the mood in the room. Marquis laughed a bit, then said to Tom in a serious manner, "As for this matter, make sure Jacob doesn't open his mouth and keep treating the slaves the same way. I don't want other nobles pointing fingers at me and use this against me." "As you wish, master. You shouldn't worry about Jacob, as he is working for quite a few years already, and I have tried to bribe him in the past by using some men as one of our rivals, but he didn't succumb at those times and immediately informed me about them, so it can be seen that he is quite happy with our arrangement," Tom replied to Marquis in a cautious way. Frank then said to Marquis, "It seems my son and John got quite a big backer this time. Our informants have said that when John and Joseph were in the auction they made an acquaintance with Princess Diana and that guy. However, this is not direct but indirect information, it was spread by Bart, who was in the same auction with them." Marquis smiled and said in a serious manner, "No wonder those brats were haughty in front of us when it came to information gathering the previous day. However, I wonder what he saw in those kids that he would offer him his networks while he wouldn't even fart to us unless we have something which interests him." Frank smiled as he too understood Steve's frustration, said to Marquis, "Maybe it is because of Princess Diana. You should know that she is quite demanding when she wants something, as long as it is reasonable, and maybe he sees something in them which we haven't or we can't." After dealing with all the things for the day, they headed to Joseph's mansion and planned for the next day. While Prince Hector and Bart also concluded their meeting at the palace in the outskirts of Pearl City. During this time, one of Vlad's men reported to him about the meeting between Bart and Prince Hector, so he started preparing for the eventual assassination which Diana had warned him about. As he was already given orders, he didn't bother Princess Diana and continued with preparations of his own. Chapter 40. After dealing with all the things for the day, they headed to Joseph's mansion and planned for the next day. Meanwhile, Prince Hector and Bart also concluded their meeting at the palace in the outskirts of Pearl City. During this time, one of Vlad's men reported to him about the meeting which took place between Bart and Prince Hector, so he started preparing for the eventual assassination which Diana had warned him about. As he was already given orders, he didn't bother Princess Diana and continued with preparations of his own. Meanwhile, when John wasn't looking at the W.D.S, he got a lot of points and experience during his absence. There was a change that he didn't expect would happen after not looking at it for a long time. He had earned a lot of W.D.S points and experience points. "Host, you are now eligible for the new offer while it is only available for a limited time period." This time Sarah didn't finish and waited for John if he was going to shut her up or not. It seems she is waiting for my reply now." After all the deals which took place during his journey, John had earned a total of 240000 W.D.S points and 250000 experience points. "Okay, tell me, what is your new offer this time around?" Since John hadn't communicated with Sarah for a long while now, John decided to listen to her new offers today. Host can now use his experience points to level up the W.D.S authority level at the cost of 170000 W.D.S points. Meanwhile, Host can also use his W.D.S points whenever required to level up the authority if it comes short. John thought that this opportunity may not come again, and it was better to utilize his experience points rather than always spending it on gift boxes which were never useful. John then confirmed on his order of using 170000 W.D.S points for future use of experience points for leveling up authority. "Host, are you sure you want to confirm this purchase?" "Yes." Deducting 170000 W.D.S points. After a few minutes. Process completed. Sarah, use all of the experience points for leveling up authority. Using experience points. Used all of the experience points for leveling up authority. Meanwhile, John thought Sarah was rather quiet today, as she did all the work rather than complaining or teasing him. It seemed that not talking to her for the last few days had worked for his benefit. "You are thinking too much. I am only planning my next move after you loosen your defenses." As I thought, I was thinking too much, this crook will never improve. Today was a free day for John and company, so they decided to tour the whole city today. Meanwhile, they decided to travel to Dolores for their meeting with Baron Mendez later on. Eva and others had decided to get hold of John today. While traveling the market and looking for clothes, a lot of new fashion showrooms had the newly designed clothes of the Snake family, which were very popular among the nobles and rich merchants nowadays. Hey, John, your new clothes have become very popular nowadays, don't you think so? Josephine asked John while they were traveling. When Joseph heard this, he was shocked that it was John who provided these designs for new clothes which have been circulating in the market. Although there were already knockoffs being made after their popularity. But the Snake family already withheld their foot in the market as their creator, because of which they got the brand recognition among the nobles. Hey, I didn't know that you were the one who provided them with those designs, Joseph said to John in a questioning manner. Well, it was well before we made contact, so you can say that it was my first ever contract with Jack and hence our business relationship. Though John actually wanted to deny because of plagiarism, but he didn't do it as he thought that no one would be harmed in this world, and explained to John about his encounter with Jack. Well, anyway, how about we look at those new clothes for now? It will be my treat today. John changed the topic and he too joined the group as thought about buying new clothes for himself and the team. Meanwhile, Joseph thought deeply and agreed to it. He also made a mental note on this matter where John designed those new clothes. These new designs were being incorporated in various other clothes and accessories as well, such as bag, etc. All of them tried various clothes at the biggest shop at the center of Pearl City and bought clothes from them. Later on, they learned that this shop had even made a contract with the Snake family for those clothes which got popular, and hence they wanted to sell it to rich merchants and knights so that people don't doubt the brand of the clothes they were selling. Meanwhile, in a mansion in Pearl City, Diana as well tried the same type of clothes which she had bought earlier. Diana asked Vlad while Maurice was serving her tea, "Vlad, what are your opinions on these designs and clothes?" Vlad was in a happy mood while he was answering Diana's questions. Well, if I have to describe it in one word, then I would say they are very efficient or comfortable. Anyway, these type of clothes suit me and my ilk more. As for the provider of these clothes, it is another one those brats who is acquainted with John and Joseph. If you didn't guess wrong, then he is Jack Snake from the Snake family. I think this matter as well is related to John since both of them are friends from North Frontier Town. I think we can expect more things from John as he had already indicated to us during our previous meeting. Anyway, that brat made some good clothes which can look good.